Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again. This week going way back to 1991, the end, if you will, of the era of heavy metal for many. Back to 1991 when we talk about Skid Row's Slave to the Grind. But before we talk all things Skid Row, how are you, my friend?
Doing well. How about you?
I cannot complain. It is really warm up here in the Northeast. Summer is definitely here. Lots to look forward to in the coming weeks and months. And so I look forward to just kind of kicking it off. And I will, like I said, I'm going to talk about all things Skid Row in a second, but I'd be remiss not to kind of walk through a lot of stuff that came out over the last week. You had brought one thing to my attention, which was a complete and utter surprise to me. When we were kids, we just absolutely adored all things Stradivarius. And we've talked about that on prior episodes. We've obviously gone into detail about, trying to track down some of those early releases with Timo Tolkki on vocals. And one of the albums that we actually tracked down was Classical Themes and Variations, his first solo release, which was like imported. It was cost an arm and a leg, but you just had to hear it because we were such massive Stradivarius fans. All of a sudden, you sent me a song called Ultima Thule, which was a song from the upcoming Classical Themes and Variations Part 2 album, the next Timo Tolkki solo album, I guess over 25 years in the making at this point, with Jeff Scott Soto on vocals and Jens Johansson and Mikko Harkkinen on keyboards on this album. This has a lot of potential. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, I thought that the song was excellent. It's interesting because I feel like Timo has always been kind of hit or miss since he left Stradivarius. Like he's had some really good, really great songs. There was that like super band that he did one album with Andre Matos and Mikko Harkkinen, who you mentioned, and Jari Kainalainen, who used to be in Stradivarius, is now in Masterplan. And I remember like the hype being so huge. What was the name of that band? Do you remember?
Was that the Symphonia release?
Yeah,
or?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. And I just remember it just like was impossible to live up to the expectations that we had for it, although it was good. Actually, the thing that I think brought me the most joy was the live shows that they did where they were playing like Lasting Child by Angra and probably something from like the glory days of Stradivarius. It was kind of cool to see Timo and Andre Matos together. But yeah, this is really cool. I don't know that there's going to be a ton of songs with vocals on this album, much like I believe the first Classical Variations and Themes only had 2 songs with vocals on them, and Timo did the vocals on that first one. But the first song I ever heard from that album was Soldier's Prayer, which was on that mixtape that Ralph made, and I to this day I think that's such a fantastic song, and that made me really want to hear the rest of that album. So I was a little surprised when I got it that it was mostly instrumental pieces. There's a Fire Dance Suite, which I think is like a takeoff on one of the songs from Fright Night, and I think that's the only other song that has vocals. So I'm expecting that this track is kind of like a 1 or a 2 off as far as songs with vocals go. The only place I've been able to find it is on Bandcamp. It doesn't look like it's been like added to Spotify or iTunes or anything like that. And you have to pre-order
on YouTube. It was the only place I could listen to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to pre-order the album on Bandcamp if you want to get the single. So I've only heard it on YouTube so far. But yeah, I think it's promising. It sounds really good. So yeah, looking forward to hearing the rest of it. I just jumped onto the iTunes store just to see if they have it yet, and it's not up yet. So
sounds like 25 plus years later, and we're still having problems finding his material. So
I know it's kind of funny how history repeats itself.
Did you have a chance to check out the new Vola single? They came out with a new album, or they're coming out with a new album on November. Is it November 1st? I stand corrected on that. They're coming out with a new album. It's called Friend of a Phantom. And to that end, they released a single called Break My Lying Tongue. having done their entire discography in the archives last year, I'm wondering if you had any thoughts about their new single.
It felt heavier than some of the stuff. I mean, all of their material kind of blended together for me because I listened to it all at one time. But I thought this was a really cool track. It definitely has that electronic sound that Vola is known for, but it's kind of in line with everything I've heard from them. But it does have like some really, especially the beginning of the song, this has like a really heavy electronic riff to it, but really good tune. I feel like a bunch of really good singles are again, I feel like I'm been saying that a lot lately, but a bunch of really good singles have been coming out lately, and this was another one. I know you liked it a lot as well.
Yeah, there was something really charming about just the keyboard and the electronic effects, which is nothing new for them. But this track, I liked it a lot. And if the album is anything like this, it's definitely going to be one to watch out for. Wasn't terribly surprised by that. I think I was more surprised by the new Powerwolf single, Sinners of the Seven Seas. This is from their new album, Wake Up the Wicked. It's due out on July 26th. Just about a month or so away, but what a song this was. This is one of those songs that you can just hear right away. It sticks in your head and you just know it's going to be part of their live set because it's going to make for a big anthemic live song, which, obviously they're known for. Did you like this one as well?
Yeah. Again, just very par for the course, which is a good thing when it comes to this band. So I'm hoping that they on this next tour they play some of the new material, because the show that we saw in New York City, I feel like they kind of covered all of their big songs, that have already been released. And now that they have this new album, Wake Up the Wicked, coming, it'll be cool to hear some tracks from it. But this is another good one. I enjoyed this one as well.
I have to think they're going to play at least a few songs from this album on the upcoming US tour, and I only say that because typically that's what bands do. I know some of the more established artists may only sprinkle in 2 or 3 new songs, but I feel like a band like Powerwolf, you'll probably get, if not half the album, close to it. Plus, of course, kind of a greatest hit set with the rest of the songs that they choose. I don't think they can go wrong.
And they have Unleash the Archers opening for them, who also have a bunch of new material. So hopefully both bands can play some songs that we haven't heard live yet.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that. That's right. That's going to be a hell of a tour. You're watching that one in Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah. After 4 days of Prog Power, what better thing to do than to go see another show? And the weekend before that, I'm seeing live Stone Temple Pilots and Soul Asylum in Raleigh. So it's going to be I'm going to see a lot of bands in about the span of 1 week.
That's awesome. Obviously that's going to be a different show, but it'll be a nice primer for the insanity. It's kind of funny that Powerwolf and Unleash the Archers will wind up being the palate cleanser. It's only going to be a 3-hour show or what have you, on the heels of going to concerts for 12 hours a day for 4 days straight or whatever it is.
If I'm conscious at that concert, I'll consider that a win. I mean, I'm probably going to be so beat by the time. I feel like I'm going to be beat by the time Saturday night rolls around, never mind Sunday night.
If it's any consolation, I have work the next day. So while you're enjoying that concert, just know I'll be flying home and going to work the next day. I've always taken that Monday off, but due to some scheduling concerns, unfortunately, I don't have that luxury this time around. So I'll be up nice and early, and I can already feel the sleep that I'll be needing to catch up on.
Yeah, hopefully you have a big weekend of nothing going on the following weekend where you can just recharge your batteries.
If only. I highly doubt it, but dare to dream. Dare to dream. Obviously, those were 3 of the songs that I had really checked out that kind of caught my ear. Did you have a chance to hear anything as well that kind of stuck out to you?
Yeah, I'll mention. I haven't listened to the new Seven Spires album yet. But they did release another single on the day of the release called Portrait of Us. And, that's one that I really want to make sure, like, I'm in, like, really being able to pay attention and really take it in. So I haven't gotten to that yet. But I will mention, 2 singles that came out, since the last time we recorded, Encepharum and Cypherum, and Sephirum. I don't know how you want to pronounce it. I'll need to defer to the band, but they have an album coming out called Winter Storm, and they released the first single from it called Winter Storm Vigilantes. And this is a band that I discovered via seeing them open for Fintroll at one of the few concerts that came through at the Montage in Rochester during my time living there. It was probably one of the first metal shows I ever saw at that venue. It was crazy. It had it was 4 or 5 bands on the bill. I want to say Barren Earth was on that bill.
Wow.
And there was somebody else too. I'd have to look it up. Fintroll and Cypherum, Barren Earth tour. There was a fourth. Rotten Sound was the fourth band, and then there were 2 local bands, including my friend Alex's band at the time. So 6 bands played. So by the time Fintroll went on, it was 1:00 in the morning or something insane. So in Cypherum and Cypherum they were not second from the top; they were third. So I was still kind of functioning by the time they went on, and they actually impressed me more than Fintroll. I thought they sounded better. I think maybe just Fintroll was exhausted from having to go on at 1:00 in the morning, but they didn't really bring the energy I was hoping. Anyway, this track, Winter Storm Vigilantes, is quite good. The album's coming out on October 18th. Metal Blade Records. I recommend that you check it out. I just find that they have this very very palatable version of folk metal. There's a little bit of death vocals, but I feel like they're kind of doing less of that as the band evolves, which is fine by me. But good stuff, really melodic and epic folk metal type stuff. So I like this track a lot. I think you had told me you'd listen to it as well.
Yeah, I liked it as well. What was kind of interesting to me, I got on this band relatively early, and I think it was their album Iron that was the first one I heard. And I must be going back over 15 years at this point, if memory serves. And for whatever reason, I kind of lost them a little bit. And I don't mean that I didn't like the sound. I just kind of lost track of them. So I haven't really given much time to their newer albums. But I had a chance to listen to this single. I thought it was really, really good. Yeah, I mean, other than the fact that they're back on my radar, I look forward to checking this whole thing out in October when it comes out.
Yeah, same here. It's been a few years since their last album, so I'm looking forward to this. The other band I wanted to mention was Fairyland released a new single called To Stars and Beyond. It doesn't appear that they have a full-length album on the horizon, but this kind of comes following the death of the longtime member, keyboard player Philippe Giordana, who passed away in 2022. At the time, I believe the band had said that they would continue on. They've had a lot of personnel changes over the years, and Philippe was one of the original members. The band has kind of had a revolving door of vocalists in its history, and a nice selection of singers. Lisa Martin of Darkmoor and Hamka fame. I believe currently, who is their singer? Currently, their singer is Archie Keane. They had Francesco Cavalieri, who is the singer of Windrose, was their singer for a time. Max Leclerc, also from Magic Kingdom, also did vocals. So anyway, this song is awesome. I remember their last album when it came out, I thought it was pretty good. It didn't blow me away or anything. This song is way better than I can remember anything from that album being. It's just really great symphonic power metal, just kind of thing that just puts a smile on your face, puts you in a good mood, puts a smile on my face anyway. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I highly recommend this one. I listened to it one time, and I was just oh, this is lovely, after one listen. So definitely recommend that. I was going to mention the Powerwolf track also, but you beat me to it, so that's great. And if I hadn't, I can't remember if I mentioned this last week or not. I may have, so if I did, forgive me. But Alterium released a new single called "Hear My Voice." It's not from their album that recently came out. I really like this track as well. So if I had mentioned it last week, I apologize. But it came out the day that we recorded the last episode, so I may not have had a chance to listen to it. But now that I have had a chance to listen to it, I actually like it quite a bit more than most of the tracks on their new album. I don't know why.
Go figure.
Yeah, it must have kind of slipped out late or whatever. I don't know if it was like from those sessions and it was a leftover track, but it's a really strong tune. So yeah, that's what I got.
Nice. I haven't heard that, but as far as the Fairyland goes, I just want to say, like, you hate to say it, but sometimes when there's an absence of songwriting for many years, obviously for, you know, in this case, for the most somber of reasons, but nonetheless, they almost came back with a vengeance, because I didn't think their last album was very good. I'm not saying that it was bad. I'm not saying that I couldn't listen to it. It just didn't grab me like their first two albums or whatever it was had done. But this single was definitely a step in the right direction in many ways. So I'm going to check it out. I think that it has potential. It's a band that we've often joked about off air, but in kidding aside, they do a very nice flower power metal type of sound that is fairly accessible. But I think maybe that was part of the reason I didn't like the last album. I thought it was a little bit too much, and so therefore it lost some of the simplicity that the early albums had. And this kind of, again, reminded me of that early material. So it'll be interesting. I hope that there is an album to follow and it's not just a single, you know, but I trust that new material is coming. I'm
sure eventually, yeah. And I do want to just point out, direct you, everyone to our website, metalexchangepodcast.com. We have a link on the, in the menu or in the top page. Depends on if you look at it on a cell phone, on a mobile browser, there's like a menu button that you hit and all the menu options come up. If you're looking at it on a web browser, it's all on the top, like in a row. But there's a link for our playlist that'll take you to Spotify. And I just posted a new playlist, volume 12 for this year. And it has a lot of the singles that we had, just mentioned, including, Ensiferum, Fairyland, Alterium, Vola, Powerwolf, new singles from Seven Spires, Simone Simmons, and many more. So check that out. Has all of our most recent playlists. Between Justin and I, we churn out quite a few playlists a year. Justin usually has 12, and I just kind of release them as singles come out and songs that I hear interest me. So there's a couple of punk rock tunes on my latest playlist to kind of change it up a little bit. But yeah, lots of good stuff out there. So definitely check out those playlists. And
it's a good way to kind of cram, a month or two worth of what we've been listening to, or in many cases, the new stuff that's out. It's like a crash course in what's coming down the pike, or new albums that are on their way. Not exclusively, but often a large majority of the stuff is just released or stuff that's about to be released.
Yeah, and also I think it makes her a good kind of a companion to our discussion. If you listen to the album that we talk about every week, probably couldn't hurt to go listen to some of the songs too that we talk about, singles wise and whatnot. So we just try to make it easy to access, and so we just made a link for it right at the top of the page. So it'll take you right to Spotify. And I know our friend Carrie from the MSR cast had reached out to us recently and just said he was listening to one of our playlists and kind of giving us a little bit of feedback at some stuff that he had heard. I mean, I know, trust me when I say it's hard to keep up with the amount of stuff, especially when you consider, like, I made a playlist probably like 3 weeks ago and I already have another one, just because that's the speed in which the stuff comes out. And it's not even just like adding tracks for the sake of adding them. These are songs that I actually like listened to and enjoyed. So there's a lot going on, but I definitely I definitely want at least to tell everyone to listen to the first track on my latest playlist. It is the punk rock cover band Me First and the Gimme Gimmes doing a cover of Juice Newton's Queen of Hearts, a classic 80s kind of country pop tune. And I've loved this band. I discovered them when I was probably in my like dial-up Napster days. They did a cover of the Phantom of the Opera, a punk rock cover that was amazing. And I went down the rabbit hole at the time and realized that literally they are just a punk rock cover band. Like they just cover songs in a punk rock style, and they're so infectious. And so they just released a new album called the Me First and the Gimme Gimmes Blow It at Madison's Quinceañera. And like they actually have like parts where they're like talking into the microphone as if they're actually at a quinceañera as like the band at the party. And, you know, it's just very, very tongue in cheek kind of stuff. But I added that as a nice little opening to my new playlist. So give that a listen.
Nice. And with that, let's turn it to this week's album and this week's artist. As I mentioned earlier, it's Skid Row's Slave to the Grind, their second full-length album. It came out June 11th, 1991. So we just had its, 33rd anniversary, which makes me feel old.
Not as old as Sebastian Bach must feel, though.
That is true, although I believe he has a solo album that's about to come out if it hasn't already. But I want to ask this question, and let me step back for all the new listeners. We've mentioned this in the past. We don't really discuss these albums in advance. And by that, I mean, like, I have no idea what your thoughts of this album are or any of the albums that we've covered in the past. We make a point not to discuss it. However,
right. And we should point out there are albums where we do know, like when we do Images and Words, we know that the both of us are going to be gushing about it, that some albums are just kind of
self-explanatory.
Obvious,
but, yeah. Right. But when it comes to something like this, you had tipped me off by just saying that, like, at least early on, it sounded a little samey to you. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that surprised me. And I'll start the conversation here because part of the reason I chose this album is that I thought every song was so separate and distinct that I thought it was going to be something you'd love. And maybe I missed the mark on that one. But going back to just Skid Row generally, I have a feeling you know a lot of the greatest hits from the first album, which when their debut self-titled release came out in 1989, this thing just blew up right away. If I'm not mistaken, it went platinum like 5 times over. It had 3 of the most famous songs, really, that had come out that year in Youth Gone Wild, 18 in Life, and I Remember You. All 3 fantastic songs, by the way.
And those were the 3 Skid Row songs that I knew.
Okay, very good. So I was going to say, you don't know any of their deeper cuts. So fair to say that you didn't know anything on Slave to the Grind, their second release.
No, I did not recognize anything, no.
Okay, very good. So I'll tell you a little story about how this came on my radar and why I picked it up. I stole this album, full stop. My sister brought this album home, and I think I was in maybe my first year of college or something like that. She was in high school, and for some reason, she brings home this CD, and I listened to it a couple of times. She went off to college, and I just kept the disc, right? So, like, I truly stole this album from my sister, but credit to her. She used to just rave about this thing, and I really never quite understood why. There were a couple of songs that I really enjoyed, but over time, I've actually grown to like this disc quite a lot. And although I don't know that the songs on this ever reached the infamy of those 3 big hits from the first album, I'm going to argue that some of the songs on here are actually better. Maybe not all of them, but some of them are actually better. So I thought it would make for an interesting kind of discussion because this, we've done a lot of albums around this 1990, 1991 era. This was one of the last metal albums or hard rock albums to just absolutely blow up before Nevermind completely changed the scene. But had this album come out a year or 2 later, I think it would have fallen upon deaf ears. But because of the timing of this thing, it too was an absolute smash success. It was 2 times platinum, not quite as good as the debut, but obviously, went platinum 2 times over, and that should tell you everything you need to know just in terms of the success. But what were your initial thoughts when you listened to this? Because it does have a bit of a different feel than the first one. I think it's a little less polished, which, quite frankly, I enjoy.
Yeah, I think that, like, I probably didn't express myself to you. I hadn't listened to the album a ton just yet. I ended up listening to this album 7 times because
Wow.
I just had a hard time getting into it. Like, and the thing is that, like, I don't think there were any bad songs. Like, there was at no point did I find the album, like, unenjoyable, but at the same time, it was like, I agree with you. Like, the songs do have, like, there isn't a sameness to the songs. The sameness that I think I was trying to express was my feelings about each song, which is, it's almost like every song was like a 6.5 or a 7 for me. And it was just kind of like straight through,
album,
like,
but nothing that blew you away.
But yeah, like, trying to, like, to listen to an album 7 times and, like, just barely come up with, like, a song of the week. It was just crazy to me. Like, I just kept listening to it over and over and over again, like, hoping there was going to be this, like, come to Jesus moment. And it just was like a solid, slightly above average, like, experience for me the whole time. Like, I was talking to my girlfriend about it, and I said, like, it's a good album. I just didn't think it was a very good album. Like, that's kind of
a come to Jesus moment, or a come to Jesus Christ superstar moment, because I think,
or come to quicksand Jesus moment.
There you go. Oh man, we could go on forever. That's really funny. What did your girlfriend say when you said it? Because I'm sure this is not her cup of tea, but at the same time, I think it's a lot more palatable than, like, a Celtic Frost album or something. Some of the stuff we've done in the archives.
Well, last night I was playing Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, and I had the album on, and this was after I had mentioned it to her, and she just walked into my room and was like, "Are you listening to mediocre metal again?" So yeah, that's kind of. This is definitely probably something that she would like more than, like
Dissection,
Dissection or Emperor. But yeah, I mean, it was fine. Like, I just there were some songs I think stuck out to me a little bit more than others. I did, like I said, I came up with a song of the week. I realized after the fact that there's a track I didn't get a chance to listen to, which is Beggar's Day, which was on like a different, there's a clean version of the album that replaces Get the Fuck Out.
Interesting. I've never heard that. I have to check that out when we're done. I literally never knew that existed.
I guess it was a bonus track or a B-side, and they used it in its place on a clean version of the album. I didn't have a chance to hear the song, so unfortunately I don't have anything to say about that tune, which... Man, like, that was one of the songs I felt like was one of the more memorable songs. So I'm glad that I had the version that wasn't the clean version, because that's
definitely
tune,
memorable.
Yeah,
it's funny it's so funny that you didn't have a standout track, and I say that because to me it's actually in some ways a little bit of an unbalanced album. There's about half of this album which I would put up near the stratosphere in terms of my enjoyment. And then there's other tracks where I agree with you. 6.5 or a 7, just enjoyable enough, but nothing that knocked my socks off. But when you put it together, it's those memorable tunes for me that really carry this album in many ways. And it's probably about half the album. So it's interesting that you didn't have that. And I'm curious for someone that listened to this with virgin ears to hear what your song of the week is, because to me, I had 3 contenders and I kind of knew what they were going to be going in. And sure enough, the cream rose to the top, as they say. So, I'll just leave that there.
A cup of coffee.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously Skid Row, this is the classic lineup. This is not Lizzie Hale on vocals. This is not Eric Grunwald on vocals. This is Sebastian Bach on vocals, Dave Sabo and Scotty Hill on guitars, Rachel Bolan on bass, and Rob Affuso on drums. New Jersey's one of the biggest metal acts out of New Jersey that's not named Bon Jovi. And
or Symphony X.
Or Symphony X, yes, or Symphony X. Debatable. I remember when the Divine Wings of Tragedy went 5 times platinum, but no, I digress. Did anything jump out to you a little bit more by the seventh listen, or did it stay pretty constant? And I'm just curious because I want to now. Then we'll get into the songs themselves.
Yeah, there were definitely some songs that, like I mentioned, I'll call it "Get the F Out" so we don't overplay the F card on this episode. But there was a handful of songs that were more memorable to me after hearing it a few times. "Slave to the Grind," the title track's one of them. "Quicksand Jesus" was another. And then there were some other songs, like I look at the title and even after listening to it 7 times, I'm like, I don't remember what that song was. Like I look at a song like Creep Show and I'm like, I don't remember this song. Like I'm going to have to play it like while I'm listening to it just to remind me.
To be completely fair, that's probably one of the worst songs on the album. So there's a reason for that. That being said, this album had 5 singles. There were 12 tracks. Mm-hmm. It had 5 singles. So like I said,
and a music video for each single.
Yeah. Well. And they were pumping this thing out like crazy, but I have to say, all in all, when you look at the songs they chose for singles, there's a reason for it. Those are probably the best songs on the album. So it's almost like they knew what was going to be the earworm for people, because it certainly was for me. I'm not saying they were definitively the best songs on the album, but 2 or 3 of them definitely are, in my opinion. So I guess with that, we'll kind of jump into it. The song kicks off with a song called Monkey Business, their first single from the album. It was released a few months before the album actually came out. And what was interesting is this is a really heavy song. It's almost been described by some as speed metal, which I never really thought of them in that category. I will make my comparisons later for who this band has always reminded me of. But yeah, this is one of the faster, speedier, thrashier songs on the album. But what's interesting is it starts with almost like a southern twang to the guitar, which is kind of a cool little intro without it being a full-blown, 2.5-minute intro track. This song gives me a very strong Guns N' Roses vibe, and it's kind of fortuitous because the band would go out and tour with Guns N' Roses extensively on the heels of this album. What's interesting also is that the verses have a bit of like a rap-like quality in the way that the vocals are delivered. It's not just singing, but he's almost rapping, something like Joey Belladonna used to do a little bit on some of the old Anthrax albums, which I know you're a huge fan of and stuff like that. But there's something about the cadence to this which lends itself to some of the rap that you even hear today. Really good riff, very heavy, and a very simple chorus that kind of just gets stuck in your head. Not my favorite song on the album, but I can't think of it opening any better.
Yeah, it's an obvious choice, I think, for a single, in my opinion. The speed metal thing I'm a little confused by, because I find this to be, even though Sebastian Bach's vocals are actually really fast in spots, the song itself is pretty mid-tempo. The next song, I'll give you, like "Slave to the Grind" has definitely a lot. It seems more like fast and aggressive to me, but this one just has kind of like almost like a bluesy kind of vibe to it, especially like towards the end of the song. It kind of like has like almost like a chill like part of it, but it's a solid tune. Definitely something I could understand being a single for, and I thought it was definitely one of the songs that I found to be most memorable of all the tracks on the album. I feel like the chorus is kind of blah, like I feel like that's kind of one of the weaker points of the song, but it's a solid tune. I feel like this is just going to be me saying everything is a solid tune for 12 songs in a row, but I like I said, I really didn't think there were any bad songs on the album, but I also didn't think there were any like outstanding songs either. So I just kind of like muddled in this kind of, 6 or 7 range the whole time.
It happens. I get it. Like it happens.
And the thing, and I'll tell you, the surprising part of it is that I really, really like the 3 singles that I'm very, familiar with from that first album. Like especially "Youth Gone Wild." I think that's such a classic like metal anthem. And I Remember You is just a great 80s, like late 80s, like power ballad, and 18 in
in
Life
Life,
also,
another,
that was another kind of ballady kind of tune, another really good,
the band writes some phenomenal ballads, and
yeah.
there's a couple
So I
of
was
them on this
expecting,
album.
I was expecting like something like that to really like pop, and then it just didn't happen for me, unfortunately. But
All right.
that said, like it wasn't like I like sometimes this is kind of my least favorite kind of album to talk about because it's easier for me to like pan something and just say that it's the shits, and then it's easy for me to like love on something and give it a 10 out of 10. It's like these kind of like middle of the road things for me where I'm like I don't really know like what exactly to say other than like it was a solid listening experience. Nothing about it was like felt
offensive,
like a slog or offensive. Like offensive is certainly a word I've used to describe other songs or albums that we've talked about in the past. This is not one of them, but it just never like what's that old saying that they talk about when a wrestling match never really gets into third gear or fourth gear or something like that. That's kind of like where
cruise
my
control
head was
the
at.
whole time.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
Well, I think that I can appreciate that why you might say that, but I think that when you get to a song like "Slave to the Grind," there are elements of this song that are brilliant. This was the second single from the album. It came out a couple of months after the album was released. But ironically enough, it was, I think, a UK only single, which I found to be a little interesting. That being said, there's this chug quality to this song. I was almost surprised in many ways that you hadn't heard this one prior to the album. If anything on the album, I would have guessed this was the one that you probably would have heard. What I love about it, it's not the most innovative riff or anything like that, but it has this dirty, almost sleazy vibe to it. And it was... I'm convinced that this band was just a precursor to bands like Hardcore Superstar and Crazy Licks and that whole genre of bands that are still rocking today. This song really lent itself to that kind of feel. And I remember when we did the Hardcore Superstar album in the archives, when we picked that and when I was listening to it, I immediately thought of Slave to the Grind because I feel like there's a lot of similarities between that style and songs like the title track on this particular album. I think the chorus is really cool. What stands out, not only here, but in other places as well, a very sparing but deliberate and excellent use of backing vocals, especially during the chorus. That to me jumped out. You don't need to overpower a guy like Sebastian Bach. He's going to command the room and obviously the soundstage. But having those backing vocals during the chorus, I thought is such a nice touch. And this is one of those songs that to me, just because of the chug-a-lug quality to it, you kind of just move your head and your foot to the song. Despite that, in a way, this is almost a pre-grunge song, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that because even though it has that chug quality to it, I hear elements of other grunge bands on a song like this, and I was surprised to find out that after they did the Guns N' Roses tour, they brought out two bands as support for them. This might be the single most incredible tour package that I've ever heard of.
I know what you're going to say, too.
I mean, how can you not? Skid Row with the opening acts of Pantera and Soundgarden. What the hell? I mean, what the crowd must have been thinking, because you can't find three bands that are possibly any more dissimilar, but still kind of would be a cool tour to go see.
At least it was three hard rock bands, like you could say. Like it wasn't like going out with like the Dixie Chicks and Snoop Dogg.
But if you're gonna stay, in the same genre, can you? I mean, in terms of like hard rock music or that kind of a thing, what an interesting package that must have been. I can't imagine that the Pantera fans and the Soundgarden fans were playing nicely in the sandbox together. And then I have to think that at that point, Sebastian probably got on the stage, started wailing, and the place just went bananas for this stuff.
Yeah, a lot of torn up flannel shirts, I think, at that show. A lot of torn up flannel shirts and tobacco all over the floor. Yeah, that's a really interesting tour package. I really like this song. I think it's like just that, like you were mentioning, that kind of the chorus with the vocal, like the extra vocals and stuff. It felt like a very tropey, like 80s like rock band in a good way. Like just it fits that era, I think, really well. interesting fact about this song, which I found in my research, and this is a really cool story. Sebastian Bach had done an interview with Backspin in February 2017, and it turns out that the version of this song that is on the finished album is the original demo that was recorded during pre-production. The band tried re-recording the song during the album sessions, and they were unable to match the intensity of the demo, and so they just released the demo as the song instead. And I have to say, like, it definitely has a bit of a more raw sound than the rest of the album, but it does sound like it was produced to sound a bit more polished than a demo would normally sound. But you could definitely tell that there's a little bit, it just feels like there's a little bit more balls on this track than maybe the rest of the album. And it's one of the songs that I thought was one of the more memorable tunes for sure.
That doesn't surprise me. But what surprised me was that it was the demo that ultimately got released. But there is like I said, there's just dirty quality to it, which I find very endearing. We get to track 3, which is the first track we're talking about that's not a single. It's called The Threat. This was another song with a kind of a memorable riff and some really cool bass lines that jumped out to me. I think the vocals during the verses are awesome, and it almost gives me like a Blackie Lawless vibe from Wasp, just in terms of the vocal delivery. An underrated chorus. This is not my favorite song by any means, but I do think the chorus is pretty cool. And I was almost happy to find out that this was a song that they play live, because when I heard this song, I said this would be a good live song, and it is. They still play this song live even in their current tours. And when I heard it, it made me really want to go out and see this band. I don't care who's singing. Some of this music I think would lend itself really well to a live show.
I can't disagree with you at all on that one. Definitely. I think this is like one of those things where I probably would have enjoyed it more in a live setting with, like, as I say, a few adult beverages or some sort of chewable type thing. I thought this was another like solid tune. It wasn't quite as memorable, I think, as the first 2 tracks, which, ended up being chosen as singles. So that could have a little bit of something to do with it. But I definitely hear like how this band would have influenced, like you said, like a hardcore superstar or a band in that of that ilk, that kind of like crazy licks, kind of grungy, that kind of grungy like
sleaze rock. I mean,
sleaze metal type deal. Like you could definitely, this song in particular, I think really gives off that kind of vibe. I think where the thing about this band that I think, or at least with this album, that I think would have taken it to the next level for me is if like an Eclipse or a Dynasty, if they had some vocal hooks to it, like more melodic kind of thing. It's very like to the point. And like I feel like it lacks in melody that maybe some of those singles from that first album, I think that really hooked you in. And that might be kind of where they lost me a little bit. Because I just think the music itself is very solid. It's just, I feel like I had a hard time getting anything stuck in my head because I just didn't find that the vocal lines had the hooks to them, even though I really enjoy Sebastian Bach's vocals, like the style of his vocals. I think he's an outstanding singer and I really enjoy hearing him sing. It's just like, I think it was something I had mentioned the first time we talked about Anthrax, is that I was just like kind of hoping for some more melody, and like it was a little bit too just like thrash and that's that's it, and that's kind of how I felt about this. This is clearly not as thrashy as Anthrax, but that's the best way I can really put it. This song I think is a good example of that, honestly.
That makes sense. I will say that as we kind of chug along here, the next track, Quicksand Jesus, is probably one of the more memorable tracks on the album for sure. What are your thoughts on this one? Because I do think that it's really a contrast to those first 3 tunes that we discussed.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of like it starts out in a really unassuming sort of way. Reminds me a little bit of like I'll Remember You. Maybe like it has a little bit of a more of a darkness to it, but it starts out really kind of slow and like kind of a slow paced kind of thing, and it's just kind of like, I think, yeah, like unassuming really would be the word for it. Like it doesn't really, I don't know. Would you call this one a ballad? It's kind of ballad.
I think so. Between kind of a power ballad, that acoustic guitar at the beginning with the bass line is just, I mean, to me, it hooks me in right away. And I don't know how I could call a song with beautiful vocals like this anything less than a power ballad. I just think it's certainly
it's like a dark power ballad.
Yeah, but like this is to me where the band really shines. It's songs like this. Not that the faster stuff isn't good, not that the heavier stuff isn't good, but songs like this are just dripping with emotion. And Sebastian Bach shows off his range because he's able to do like kind of, you know, the low stuff and then the screamy stuff at the same time. It's rather remarkable. And obviously there's a reason why he was on Broadway for as long as he was as a singer. And I made the joke earlier, but the reality is he's a force to be reckoned with on the stage. I also think the lyrics to this song are fantastic. It's just a gem of a tune and it's not my song of the week, but it easily could have been.
I thought on my first couple of listens that this was going to be my song of the week. It's not going to be. Another song kind of emerged after a few dozen listens, it seemed, but I thought this was good too, and I agree with you. I think that there's something about like their kind of mellow songs like this, or mellower songs, that I think really shine. And this is definitely one of them. I even get like a little bit of a Sabotage vibe here and there from Skid Row, depending on the song. A little bit here, I think it's more in the guitar work than anything else, especially a song like this where there's more acoustic guitar being used than so anywhere else so far on the album. So
yeah, I can totally hear that. I'll make another comparison when we get to this song, Psycho Love, the next track, just because I couldn't believe it because it never jumped out to me like it did. But the last time I listened to this album this week, something jumped out to me. But on Psycho Love, it's really the low end, I think, that drives this tune. It has this crunch to it. That said, I'd be not. This is not my favorite song on the album. I think that the chorus is not great. I don't think that the verses are particularly fantastic. I mean, they're interesting, but they're definitely better than the chorus, but it's not my favorite. Sebastian Bach at times sounds like he's going off the rails on this song, which I guess makes sense given the title. The sleazy feel is back with this song, which I do enjoy generally speaking, but what jumped out to me, the instrumental sections in the bridge actually gave me a Fates Warning vibe, which I thought was kind of interesting. I had never heard that before, but it would make a little bit of sense if only insofar as Fates Warning had been around for years at this point. So possibly the Northeast connection here. Maybe there was a little bit of unintentional influence. I don't know, but maybe you like Psycho Love more than me. It's just not my favorite song.
Yeah, I mean, no joke. Like, this was one of those songs where, like, I looked at the track listing after listening to the album 7 times, and I was, like, having a hard time remembering what song it was. I literally had to, like, put it back on again. The beginning of the song where it opens up with just the bass and the drums, that is another thing that reminded me of Sabotage, because they have songs that kind of open up like that. I think of kind of reminded me a bit of Awaken, which I think was, like, a lesser-known song from Poets and Madmen. But just kind of reminded me of like John Oliva or Sabotage. But then like once Sebastian comes in, you're dealing with like a completely different style of vocalist. And let me ask you this: did you ever watch Gilmore Girls?
Never seen the show.
Okay, so Gilmore Girls was a show on the WB/CW that lasted for a while, and it had Melissa McCarthy was the character on it, like way before she blew up, and Lauren Graham is the main character. And so one of the ongoing jokes on the show is that one of the characters is in like a garage band, and she's like a teenager, and one of the members of the band is Sebastian Bach, and he's just this you know, older guy who's like their guitar player. And that's the joke, is that like this guy is like just like the only band he could find to play with is like playing with like teenagers or whatever.
That's so funny.
And he plays it totally straight. It's great. I'm curious how many people
is he a recurring character on the show, or was it?
Oh yeah, like he's like in
really?
A bunch of episodes. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
I have to go on to IMDb and just look and see how many episodes he was in, but he's like it's great because it's just like it's almost like he's playing a parody of himself. It literally, like, if you look him up on IMDb, and it's like the top 4 things he's known for. The first thing that comes up is Rock of Ages, and the second thing that comes up is Gilmore Girls. He was Gil on Gilmore Girls, and he was in 13 episodes from 2003 to 2007.
What a character, man! Unbelievable. I commendable, and the fact that
it was one of the when I watched the whole show, and it was one of the highlights for me. Every time he would pop up, I would just get such a kick out of it.
That's great. What did you think of Get the Fuck Out? Because, and I say that because this song, when I was a kid, I never really liked, but this has grown on me. It's kind of a parody track, but the drums on this thing are really kind of interesting, and it gives me a big time Guns N' Roses vibe. I don't know if you're familiar with the Use Your Illusion albums, but they do a song called Get in the Ring. It was kind of came out around the same time as this particular song. They remind me so much of each other. They don't really sound alike, but just the whole feel of it, totally cool. And despite the cheesy lyrics, there's something oddly endearing about it. I don't know why, but I think more than any other track on the album, I'm more curious to hear your opinion of this one than any of the others.
Well, you're not my old lady and you ain't a tattoo. I mean, that's like a hell of a line right there. I thought this was like song was kind of dumb when I first heard it, and the more I listened to it, the more I kind of enjoyed it.
Yes.
It kind of reminds me of like Steel Panther, but 20 years before like there would be a Steel Panther. It also reminded me of when I was in college. One of my housemates had a line that he would always use at the end of the night. He'd be like, we'd run out of beer or whatever. We just wanted people to leave, and he would just like stand in the middle of the room and he would just yell and go, "All right, everybody, thanks for coming, but more importantly, thanks for getting the fuck out." And like that's
you should have just played this song. It would have served the same purpose.
Had I known, if I had played Skid Row, most of the people would have left anyway.
There you go. You get
regardless
to
of regardless of what song it was. The part where Sebastian Bach kind of like just like it's almost like a speaking line, like. It just drips with his personality, and I love that about that.
It's almost like a sarcasm there, like you can feel it, yeah.
And it's great. It's like I couldn't picture anybody else doing that line but him. Like he's just so smarmy and obnoxious. It's great. And it's just kind of a catchy song. It's a short, quick track. It's like a real toe tapper, and it ended up being one of the songs that, like, I mean, just for the title alone. I mean, how do you forget the one song that has a swear word in the title? But I definitely get the GNR reference. It reminds me a little bit of there's a song from Get a Grip, Aerosmith's Get a Grip album that came out in 93 that kind of has that same kind of like cadence and pace to it that kind of reminds me. It might have been Line Up, something a little more upbeat for an Aerosmith tune, but I thought it was a fun track. So that was a highlight, I think, for me.
Nice. And that brings us to, I guess we'll call it side B of the album, Living on a Chain Gang. This, to me, was the one song that could have easily been a single that they didn't call a single for this album. I'm a huge fan of this song. It is not my song of the week. Let me say that. But I will say that this song was just a shade below. It's probably my third or fourth favorite song on the album. Again, just sleazy verses, had crazy licks, as I mentioned earlier, comes to mind. And as I become more and more of a fan of that sound, I've become more and more a fan of this song. Cool backing vocals, fantastic chorus, and it's just something you want to kind of have a beer and rock out to. And arguably the best guitar solo on the entire album. It actually cemented the fact that, and I mentioned this earlier, I have to see this band live at some point. I just think it would be like a fun night. Yeah,
I'll go with you.
Nice.
Maybe Soundgarden will open. I don't know. Oh, wait, the Soundgarden doesn't exist, I don't think, now that Chris Cornell's passed. Maybe Lizzie Hale can sing for Soundgarden too. Wow, Pantera, another band. Like these are all bands that just have people that are pretty integral that are not alive anymore.
But yet Pantera is touring.
Yeah, that's true. This is probably on the upper end of the songs that I like. The chorus I think is really memorable in this one. This is a pretty good tune. I definitely agree with your take on this one, and one of the songs that I remembered. And again, it's like that whole kind of chorus thing where it's like that, like everybody's kind of shouting the chorus. It's just kind of like a classic, late 80s, early 90s kind of hard rock, move, but it works.
It's a gimmick, but it works.
Yeah, if it's a catchy enough chorus, it works. And this is one of those cases, I think.
Now, we get to Creep Show, which not my favorite song. I think, you talk about like offensive songs. This is not offensive. It's just not something that grips me. It's a little bit slower paced. It has almost like a deliberate feel to it. And other than the vocal lines, which are really hard and kind of fast, I don't have many great things to say. I'll say that it almost gives me the vibe of like alternative rock with kind of the drumming that you'd hear on an 80s kind of hair metal band. So it's kind of cool in that regard. It's just unremarkable, I think, when you compare it to the rest of the album. The one thing I'll say, though, is that what this song did for me is it kind of made me realize how good the mix is on this album. I thought the mix was really good and held up well for an album that's almost 35 years old at this point.
Yeah, agreed 100%. It does sound very good. I will say, like, this album might have benefited from coming out like 10 years earlier, because chances are there would have been only like 8 songs on the album, and they could have like picked the 8 best songs, and it might have been a tighter album.
If they would have gotten rid of about 3 or 4 of these songs, the album would be really, really good, in my opinion. It's a very good album, and I think my score will reflect that. But at the same time, you have to kind of trim the fat, because there's some songs that almost felt like they were filler. That being said, the next song, In a Darkened Room, is not one of them. This was the other song I had as a candidate for Song of the Week. It's not my Song of the Week, but this is a solid power ballad. The guitar work is amazing. The verses are amazing. I think the chorus is solid. It's just so, I don't want to say underrated, but when you kind of compare it to the other songs and the other singles, nobody ever talks about this song. But at the same time, I find it to be almost infectious in how catchy it is.
It's interesting that there's like 3 songs kind of in this slower style on the album, and all 3 were released as singles. Like 3 out of the 5 singles are those 3 kind of ballad-esque, balladish songs. Yeah. And those are really like kind of my favorite tracks from the album, because I think they just stand out. And like I mentioned earlier, I think the band just does a really good job with tunes like this, as we saw on their first album. But yeah, this is another one. I don't know if I like it quite as much as the other 2, Quicksand Jesus and Wasted Time, but it's definitely a solid tune. And again, like Sebastian Bach has a way of really just singing in a very emotional way, and I think this is another one of those tracks where he really shines. I always thought he was such a great singer. It's a shame that the band could never like figure out how to get along with him, and vice versa. It's just like one of those like heavy metal, divorce story, like classic divorce stories that just is like, you constantly still hear them talking about like,
each other too.
Yeah. And the whole idea of Sebastian Bach going back to Skid Row is like this ongoing, it's almost like a heavy metal meme, it's like this ongoing thing. Like, it would certainly be, I think, more so from a live experience standpoint, it would be pretty awesome. I mean, I don't know if Sebastian Bach still has the chops. I have no idea if his voice is still holding up in a live setting, but I think it would be really cool. I think a lot of people would be clamoring to see him, play with his original band. Because honestly, like, would you disagree that he was the most well-known member of Skid Row?
Oh, no, not by a country mile. In fact, almost, I don't want to say like, almost like Queensryche, where Jeff Tate was like the voice of the band. Now they've done very, very well, and they still sound great. And I'd go see them tonight if I could. But the reality is, when you think of Skid Row, you think of Sebastian Bach, and when you think of Sebastian Bach, you think of Skid Row. So when they're not together,
or Gilmore Girls,
in your case, yes. But honestly, like there's no. Listen, if Slash can get back with Guns N' Roses and they can kind of heal the wounds there, come on, guys. Like let's. I'm sure that if they got back together, the ticket sales would go up dramatically.
Although you have to admit, and I think we had like a conversation in our Patreon chat group about this. It's like there's way more money on the table for a Slash to get back with Guns N' Roses and to get Axl back in the band and like have them go like the listen, like I don't care how much you hate a guy, like somebody throws that much money at you, you just suck it up and deal with it and
put me in a different plane in a different dressing room and we'll be fine. It's like
take me down to Paradise City and take him somewhere else.
But at the end of the day, cut the check, right? Yeah, no argument there. We got 3 left. The next song is called Riot Act. It's faster paced. To me, it has like a 70s rock vibe combined with that sleaze element that just is kind of prevalent on the album. This song has the elements for me, but has never really resonated to it. It has an angrier vibe to it, which is fine. It just misses the mark. And although it doesn't do much for me, if somebody else said this was my song of the week, I'd be like, I kind of get it. It's just not for me.
Yeah, same with me. Like I think it's in the same vein as some of the faster tracks on the album, like Slave to the Grind. It just has like a nice pace to it, and okay chorus, but great line. You're saying it's raining, but you're pissing down my back. Another like classic line. That one really stuck out to me. Solitude. Like again, I know I said that a million times already, but
you're going to use that one in your common vernacular going forward, I'm sure. So that'll be a treat.
Yeah, that's when I can't come up with anything like super positive or super negative to say. I'm just gonna be like, solid tune. Put it on a shirt. Solid tune.
No, I meant the pissing down my back part. I mean,
I've been saying that. I've been saying that for years.
So they stole your line.
Yeah, don't piss on my head and tell me it's raining.
There's 2 tracks left, and one of them is not so great, and the other one is clearly, I think, our song of the week at this point, which is interesting.
I think that's where we're heading.
It isn't Mud Kicker. This is a song I forgot about, and I have not much to say other than it's good that it's buried on the back end of this album. It's more mid-paced. The vocals are definitely the highlight, but the song itself is kind of not memorable and not very good. When you compare it to Wasted Time, which comes after it, there's no comparison for me. So I don't have much to say other than it's on there, and it would have probably been better well served to have just been kind of cut. But if they needed to come up with a 48-minute album, I certainly understand why it's on there.
Yeah, I would say I would put this along with Creepshow and Psycho Love as probably like the least memorable tracks on the album for me. Like again, they were almost just kind of like a 5 or a 5.5, like just like solid average, pretty good, but not really super memorable. I think if you maybe pull those songs out, maybe The Threat, you knock those 4 songs out and you turn this into an 8-track album. Monkey Business, Slave to the Grind, Quicksand Jesus, Get the Fuck Out, Living on a Chain Gang, In a Darkened Room, Riot Act, Wasted Time. I think you have a way tighter album. But I mean, like, what are you going to do? Like, it's still an under 50-minute album. It's not super long by like our standard. It's just,
It's an easy listen. Like I felt, at least for me, like it was something I could listen to a lot this week and never feel like it was dragging. Like it would end and then
I'll say that this my 7th time through, which was earlier today, was the first time and only time I listened to the song or the album with headphones on. And I will echo what you said earlier. I thought it sounded tremendous, especially with headphones on. I was really impressed with this, 30-plus-year-old album sounding as good as it did. So I think it added a little bit more enjoyment level to me to listen to it, not kind of just get kind of like faded out with speakers where like there's other noise going around or whatever and other atmospheric type stuff. Whereas like I was sitting by the pool and just listening to this with like, AirPods on and just really like taking it in for the first time. And I think that kind of probably pushed my score slightly higher than it would have been otherwise. But it was, hearing Wasted Time for the seventh time. And I was like, yeah, this has got to be it. Like, this is just, it's a great way to end the album because it's just another emotional Sebastian Bach tour de force. But of like I'd mentioned, like of the three ballads, so to speak, I think this one just is the strongest one. They just have a knack for doing these kind of slower, more emotional tracks really, really well. And there's three really good ones on this album, and I think this one's the best.
Let's give it a listen, and then I'll share my thoughts as to why I also picked it for my Song of the Week.
I think back to the times when dreams were what mattered. Time stalking youth naivety. You said you'd never let me down, but the horse stampedes and rages in the name of desperation. Is it all just wasted time? Can you look at yourself when you think of what you left behind? Is it all just wasted time? Can you live with yourself when you think of what you've left to me?
It's been a few months since I think we've both selected the same Song of the Week, but I do think it's fitting, especially on this album, because this particular song, Wasted Time, is simply perfect in my eyes. This scratches every itch that a power ballad would otherwise want. It's an earworm, but it has like the beauty of a ballad and the power that makes this band just a little bit different from some of their contemporaries that were specializing in like the hair ballads, if you will. And a great acoustic guitar, the best vocal performance for my money on the entire album. You've got the cleans, you've got the edgier vocals as well. The lyrics are great. The verses are good. The chorus is amazing. It's just a perfect song and the best bridge on the album as well. And I can't imagine ending an album any better than this, or at least have this album ending any better. It's just a perfect tune. And I think it is fitting that we both selected it.
Do you know what the song was written about?
I don't know what the song is written about. I know the lyrics are pretty cool, but what is it written about?
It was written about the spiraling effect of drug use on Steven Adler, who was the original drummer for Guns N' Roses.
Interesting, which I guess makes sense. And I know that he's suffered, with that for a while. That's fascinating. But where tragedy breeds inspiration, and this is definitely an inspired tune. So appreciate you taking the journey with me. I know it was a little bit different for you, and definitely appreciate you taking the time with it, because I think after a while I'm glad it started to resonate at least a little bit.
Yeah, and I do want to share like one more piece of trivia about this album, which I think is really interesting.
The cover art?
Yeah, the cover art was actually painted by Sebastian Bach's father, David Björk, who happens to be a realist painter known for working in the postmodern genre. So talk about, getting the family to help out. I'm going to see if I could find the full mural and use that for our video version.
Nice.
Rather than just the normal cover art, because there is, as some albums in the past, I think of Manowar's Triumph of Steel, of all things, where you fold open the CD liner notes and you have like this, this mural that's 6 times the size of the cover. Anyway, it's set in the medieval era, and it depicts people using modern technological gadgets, which is really interesting. And it was inspired by Caravaggio's Burial of St. Lucy from 1608, and shows John F. Kennedy, of all people, in the crowd. So really cool. I thought that was such a cool little piece of trivia regarding this album. I know we don't always talk a ton about cover art, but I just thought that was definitely worth mentioning. I had no idea that Sebastian Bach's father was a painter, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought when I heard that as well, I was very surprised. But I recently heard an interview with him. I think it was on XM Radio or something, and I think it was Eddie Trunk that was interviewing him, and he referenced his dad multiple times. So I knew that there was a relation, a very strong bond there, to say the least. But then I found out about the cover art, and I was pleasantly surprised. But that being said, given the effort that you put into this album, I'm really curious to find out where it lands on a scale of 1 to 10.
I decided to give this one a 6.875, just shy of a 7. It was, I think it was an above average album. I just think that it never, like I said, it just never got into that 7.5 range. I think that had they pared it down to like the 8 best tracks, it might have pushed the score up a little bit higher. I think that some of the mediocre songs kind of pull it down a little bit, but it was enjoyable. Like, it was a good listen, and I'm glad that I got to hear some of the tracks that I was not familiar with that I, ended up enjoying, particularly like the 8 that I had mentioned. So curious to see where you have it at.
So I know I gushed about some of these songs, and I'll probably continue to do so in perpetuity, but it's not a perfect album. There's obviously a handful of tracks that are fine, but just not mind-blowing. I give it a 7.5. There's certain songs on here that I would probably put as a 10. There's a lot of songs that I'd probably put as a 5 or a 6, and when you kind of put it all together as the 12-song package, it's a 7.5. But with the caveat that it's a 7.5 that I will go back and listen to repeatedly, because some of these remarkable tracks bring me back to the album even all these years later. But objectively, it's a 7.5 for me. And yeah, I'm glad we got to cover it. So I appreciate that. I want to mention a couple of news items, and we talk about timeliness. Last week, we obviously covered The Seventh Sign by Yngwie Malmsteen. Yngwie had just announced a bunch of tour dates, so it was almost like he listened to the episode and said, I better get back on the road. He's doing a 40th anniversary U.S. tour. It kicks off September 26th in Fort Myers, Florida. He's doing a lot of shows. It actually ends November 18th here in New York City. I have not seen Yngwie in quite some time. But again, when you think about all the singers he's had, I don't know if this is the tour that I want to go back to necessarily, but I did find it interesting that he was doing basically 2 months of shows all throughout the country. But yeah, I mean, he's obviously one hell of a guitar player. I don't know if it's coming anywhere that close to you, but we've got a couple of shows up in the Northeast and then a lot of shows out west and down south.
I'd be a lot more inclined to see Yngwie live if he had any of his ex-vocalists on tour with him. When you look at that laundry list of Jeff Scott Soto and Joe Lynn Turner and Mark Bowles and Mike Vesser, who we talked about last week, like just like a who's who, and I'm not even naming everybody, like just like he picked the worst vocalist he's ever had himself. And he's such a fantastic guitar player. You'd think he'd want to just focus on playing the guitar. I mean, I'm sure it's probably easier, the less egos and whatever, but I don't know. I would feel like I'd be way more excited to see him if I knew that like Jolyn Turner was going to be singing or whatever,
hell yeah.
Or Jorn Land.
Oh, dude, I mean, I saw him with Jorn, which was a religious experience. It was Jorn Land, it was John Macaluso on drums, another alum of the podcast, and Jorn Land all opening for Dio. It was if
that was the Yngwie lineup, I would be way more excited about going to see a live Yngwie show. I'll be very honest with you.
I can't blame you. I can't blame you. It is rather remarkable, but alas, here we are. And here we are back after nearly 5 years. Pretty Maids has played their first concert. They did a warm-up gig in preparation for a bunch of festivals that they're playing over the summer. They also got announced for the Monsters of Rock cruise next March. I am so jealous of anybody that gets to see this band live, but I was so happy to see that they were playing again. Given Ronnie Atkins' health issues, he was recording music fast and furiously, but I was a little surprised to find out that they were going to play shows again. So when I saw that it actually happened, I was, it did good for the soul.
Yeah, it looks like they have played 3 shows now. Loving the song choices on the set list. This is a band that and we both have said, like, I just hope we haven't seen them only the one time we saw them. I hope we get to see them again, because they are just they're just one of those bands I got into like crazy late into their existence. But I'm still in the process of kind of digging into their back catalog. I've listened to like every album they've released since I became a fan, but there's so many albums like prior to that Pandemonium album, which was when I started to get into them, and there's just like a lot. We did an episode on Future World, and I have a feeling we'll revisit Pretty Maids again. I don't know which album. There's so many to choose from, but they have a lot of really good tunes. So I really hope that we haven't seen the last of them, and I'm glad to hear that Ronnie is doing well enough. Certainly explains why he wasn't playing with Avantasia, because it sounds like he's back with the Pretty Maids and back at it. So that's really awesome news, because I think there was definitely a time where we were wondering if they were ever going to play another live show again.
Well said. Well said. Looking ahead to next week, it is the first of the month, or the first release of the month. We have just done Skid Row's second album. It came out in 1991. Next week, we do another band's second album, but it came out in 1990, and it is widely regarded as one of the better thrash albums ever. It's Forbidden's second album, Twisted Into Form. It came out March 30th of 1990. I have never heard this band, believe it or not. I know they played Prog Power. I just didn't watch the set. They had a massive discography. I kind of just let it go by the wayside. So this is going to be a new one for me. I trust it'll be a new one for you as well. But I'm curious, because thrash has been a hit or miss genre, especially for you. Even more so than some of the eclectic black metal and some of the other stuff. But thrash is really hit or miss. Some of the stuff I think you're really a fan of, and other stuff not as much. I'm so curious about this one, because just the little that I know is a little bit different than some of the stuff that we definitely cover on the show on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, like if you had told me before we started the podcast that I would rank an Overkill album ahead of an Anthrax album, I think I would have been really surprised. So yeah, I guess we'll see. I haven't had a chance to really listen to this yet, so I'm curious to see how I feel about it. But this was actually requested by two of our Patreon members, Chris Willenbrock and Charles Florio. So obviously that actually doesn't happen a ton. Like, we have a pretty long list of requests, and I want to say that was one of the only ones that was listed by more than one person. So it seemed like a good choice to kind of get two people's requests into one episode. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this, and I do have our next episode already picked out for the following week, and I'm really excited about revealing that. But we'll talk about that next week. In the meantime, from Skid Row, from Yngwie Malmsteen to Skid Row to Forbidden, kind of hitting some of these early '90s albums that are really well regarded. So looking forward to this one, and should be interesting. Yeah, like you said, thrash is always a funny genre for me. There's times where I really enjoy it, and then there's times where I just kind of shrug my shoulders. So we'll see which one this is.
It's interesting because we've done a lot of American thrash, but I haven't, and maybe I'm trying to spare you, but I haven't even dipped our toe into some of the other thrash that's immensely popular over in Germany. Your bands like Destruction and Creator and bands in Sodom and bands like that. I feel like I'm overdue, but the Forbidden will scratch the itch for now, and then at some point before the end of the year, I'd be remiss not to kind of compare it to one of the contemporaries over in Europe and Germany in particular. So lots to look forward to. A big thank you to all of our Patreon members. We appreciate your support. We'd love to hear your feedback. If there's something that we should be doing differently or something you want more of, let us know. We put some feelers out on our social medias. We invite everyone to join us there. For everybody else that is not a member of the Patreon, consider joining. But other than that, give us a like and a follow. It just helps other people find the show. And we hope you enjoyed our rendition of Slave to the Grind. Lots to look forward to, as I said. And I look forward to taking the journey with you as we kind of get through the second half of 2024.
Yeah, there's still a lot of albums that I think are yet to come that I think we're going to be. It's kind of weird to think that we're going to have like this end of year list and there's a ton of albums that we don't even know about yet or just haven't heard yet. And so, like I mentioned earlier, that Seven Spires album, I'm really excited to dig into, and there's just a lot of stuff still to come. Let's not forget that. Loudwire released an article of the best albums of the year so far, and the first one listed was Green Day. So,
what can I say? Love the album, or like the album. It's definitely not number one on my list, but to be fair, it is in chronological order. But that is interesting and something people should check out. But I hope you enjoy the week, my friend. I look forward to catching up with you next week when we talk about some classic thrash that is widely regarded as a quote-unquote legendary thrash album, so it should be fun.
Looking forward to it.
Take it easy, my friend.
Take care.